steering.
Okay, Ajahn, you're live now.
Oh. Is everybody here? Harry's not here. Anybody else? Oh. Maybe not just interested. Chill.
He's still in the sala with Ajahn Tiradhammo. He's not there anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got 1 minute. 48 seconds. If this clock is right. Yeah. Who knows? Who cares?
Yeah, 2 minutes, but you can say whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So we're investigating the Satipatthana Sutta of the 10th Sutta of the Majjhima Nikāya, middle-length discourses. Everybody's read it, I hope. So there's various, of course, degrees of refinement. I guess you can say that I would say that the for people who are interested, anybody seriously interested in practicing the Buddha's teachings, this is probably the most important discourse for practice. And that being said, there's not a lot of explanation of it. It's primarily just very detailed instructions how to practice. The assumption being that when you practice, you'll find out for yourself. You'll have your own direct experience, so you don't need a lot of explaining beforehand. You'll find out if you practice. So, otherwise, it can be just a bit, what do you say, a lot of information. It can be a little bit abstract, especially for people who are totally new to Buddhism. There's familiar terms which they wouldn't recognize. Sort of jargon terms in Buddhism, like mindfulness, for example. There would be translation of sati, which was come across over 100 years ago. One of the early translators, Professor Rhys Davids, came up with that term, mindfulness. And probably it was very good, obviously, because it survived for 100 years. But it also, for the average person, probably it's a little bit old-fashioned. He was in the Victorian times, so maybe mindfulness was used then. But today, except in Buddhist circles, you hear about mindfulness? On a building site, does somebody say be mindful? As you're hammering in a nail? Not really.
These days.
Yes,
Yeah.
these days it's always has money
Oh.
too.
Yeah.
Really? Oh.
It's a buzz.
It's become, oh yeah.
Anything with to do with
Even on
money.
building sites? I mean, not just in Buddhism?
He's talking about Vipassana once.
Oh.
I'm not joking.
Okay.
It's true though, yeah.
Yeah, oh. Yeah, okay. I'm not out there anyway on the building site, so I don't know, but in my days it's a bit of an unusual word. But which was good in one sense because one had to stop and think, what is mindfulness? If it was just an ordinary casual word, it would probably be co-opted already into our dialect, into our jargon. And forget about it then. But when it's a little bit unusual, you got to stop and think, what is mindfulness? I mean, it's so sometimes I would translate it in general terms as just as awareness, to be more familiar, not to get too Buddhist jargony. And even today, if mindfulness is used, as you say, more commonly, many times it's not the mindfulness the Buddha was teaching. It's been simplified, it's been secularized, all the rest of it. Because the Buddha taught mindfulness, as it says in the very beginning of the scripture, the direct path to Nibbana. How many people in the world practice mindfulness for the direct path to Nibbana? It's more like probably being more efficient at your work and being less neurotic in your daily life, but for Nibbana. So in a way, it's been sort of a little bit short-sighted view of mindfulness, as the Buddha taught it. That's why it can be helpful to study it in detail. So, do I have to read it, or you already remember it? It's helpful to go through it bit by bit because, as I mentioned, it is very kind of detailed instructions, and some of them are a little bit maybe hard to understand for people who are not familiar with practice so much. But besides being the direct path, and then the Buddha gives the 4 different Satipatthanas, the themes of developing mindfulness around, which is very important too, because one can develop mindfulness or awareness with many things. But the Buddha points out these particular 4 areas of our experience, which are very useful or important to investigate. And the first one, and there seems to be a progression in refinement of them, starting off with the body, and then feelings, and then states of mind, and then specific states of mind, if you like, called the Dhammas. Some of these are specific states of mind, some are particular Buddhist categories, which would recognize are very skillful to investigate, like the 5 hindrances and the 5 groups of grasping, for example. So the first exercise is the contemplation of the body, and the instructions, some useful key words are that one contemplates the body. To contemplate. This is it's not just a matter of, at one level mindfulness is awareness observing, but because there are certain instructions how to observe, when it's actually contemplating, looking at, being aware of the body, feelings, states of mind in a particular way, which amounts to contemplating. It doesn't mean it's thinking about, but it means that it's investigating, if you like, more investigating than just thinking about. Because the key to practicing mindfulness, Satipatthana, is direct experience. My awareness, when it's developed, becomes a direct seeing. It's not conceptual. Unfortunately, we usually observe things very, very briefly, and then go into our conceptualizing mind. We interpret, we perceive, we interpret, we recognize, we remember, conceptualize, and then proliferate about them. A long story. This is going back to the very beginning stages. And so mindfulness, or sati, is related to attention. Attention in the Buddhist psychology is one of the fundamental functions always present in the mind. You need some degree of attention to be able to observe anything. But for most people, that attention span is very, very quick. And now I think a lot of people suffer from attention deficit disorder, right? There's so many things to attend to. It is exhausting to attend to everything. I was just mentioning about learning to drive. Oh my goodness, so many road signs. I was just considering so many road signs to observe. You read all the road signs, it distracts you from driving. if you had to read them all, but I guess people just don't read them. Just glance, okay, turn here, speed limit, whatever, bump or something or other, slow down for a corner. But mindfulness is developing this ability to attend to something in a purposeful way. So we attend to, give attention to specific themes and in a specific way. And it's developing it, so it's an extension, if you like, of attention. Rather than allowing that attention to go into the other usual mental activities of recognizing and perceiving and thinking about and speculating about just what's there. Come back to observing again. So the attitude is important. So one contemplates the body with diligence or ardently. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi has ardent, and I should mention, for those who are really serious about studying Satipatthana, this is probably the best book you can get, Venerable Analio. This whole thick book here, I don't know how many hundred pages, are an explanation of those 20 pages in there. But some of it is kind of a discussion. He discusses various opinions from different teachers and the commentaries and things. So a lot of it is not that necessary to, unless you're really interested. But he does bring together a lot of information from all over the Pali Canon, as well as other teachers, and even other academics and psychologists. So it is, if you're up to it. So I mostly refer to his translation and his view of things. I don't agree with all of them, but they're pretty good. So he translates that word atapi as diligence, from Nyanaponika translated as ardently. Well, you get the idea anyway. It means you need to put some effort into it. It's not a casual practice. And one has to be a little bit careful that one doesn't, in the Buddhist context, not ardent and vigilant and diligent, these things. The Buddha emphasized the importance of the middle way, doing it in moderation. Some people can have a lot of energy, and they're very, very compulsive in their approach, or they're very single-minded. They really want to get enlightened quickly. But the Buddha points out a middle path and middle way. And a very well-known simile the Buddha gave was to tune your lute. You know what a lute is? But a guitar. To modernize it. A guitar, a stringed instrument in Buddhist time was a lute. So the Buddha gave the analogy of tuning the strings of the stringed instrument, you see. Anybody has played a stringed instrument? If it's too tight, ding, it's too high, I think, isn't it?
It's easy to break.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's too high tone anyway. If it's too loose, it's too flat. I forget my music. Long time ago. But anyway, you have to tune it just right to get the right note. So it's not just a matter of only diligence, but indeed some degree of mindfulness to recognize too tight or too slack. And the second attitude is fully aware. Again, I prefer Venerable Analio. He uses the translation of clearly knowing, because the word here is sampajanya. It comes from the root pajanati, right? Remember your Pali? Pajanati means to know, means knowing. See? And it's sampajanya, so it's a kind of an intensified knowing. So clearly knowing. And this, because it's related to this word for knowing, it's also close to the word for wisdom, panya. See, so clearly knowing is the basis for the arising of wisdom. But it's a different kind of wisdom. It's not the intellectual wisdom or knowledge. It is clearly knowing, directly knowing, intuitively knowing, you see. And then fully aware, or clearly knowing, and mindful. Mindfulness, yes. Having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Again, covetousness and grief, there are different translations. I think Nalio has desires and, not grief, but no, not aversion either. It's not quite. It's domanassa. So domanassa is sort of like related to dukkha. There's somanassa, domanassa, sukha, dukkha. So it's sort of like ill-mindedness, unpleasant-mindedness. Mm-hmm. So they usually say, you say happiness, you're happy or you're sad, right?
Grief.
That's what he has, grief here. So it's not quite just grief. It's sort of like a little bit more. I think Vimal Nalio has dejection or something. You feel a little bit off. Not so happy and content. A little bit off. And then covetousness or desires is attraction. It's like attraction or repulsion, if you like. Putting away these two, which are kind of fundamental reactions to perceiving something. Either you like it, it's like or dislike. You like it or dislike it. But when there is mindfulness developed, you go beyond. Like and dislike, they're very personal. What's somebody's like is somebody else dislike. So it's a very subjective interpretation, what you like or dislike. So to put that away, also to be able to do that, it's not a matter of suppressing it, but it requires calmness of mind. When the mind is calmed down, a lot of those subjective references fall to the background. So it implies some degree of concentration, samadhi, some degree. When the mind has more concentration, has more calm, then like and dislike fades to the background. Doesn't mean it's gone away. It's just temporarily put to sleep. So those are the conditions, you say, the supportive conditions for development of mindfulness then. If you're still practicing with like and dislike, it's not very well developed. I want to be mindful of pleasant feeling, for example, or pleasant sensation in the body, but not unpleasant one. That's cheating. Well, that's not mindfulness well developed. It's still very subjectively contained or orientated, you see. But once mindfulness gets developed, as they say, it's close to attention, so it is a non-personal function. So when sati gets developed, you'd say your mind rises above the subjectivity, subjective preferences. That's when it's developed. Because sati is not personal. So then we come to the exercises. And I mentioned just to look at the first few of these exercises, right? Did somebody look ahead? Well, I mean, it says in the very beginning anyway. Okay, you already have been notified that there are 4 of these areas, themes for mindfulness, right? Body, feeling, states of mind, and dhammas. Okay. But generally speaking, it's more helpful to start off with the body awareness, because we say the body is slower to change, the body is a bit more coarse. So, and then the feelings are a little more subtle. I don't know if we go there or not today anyway, but maybe next week. So the instructions are starting off with being aware of the body, and there's I get 3 exercises. I think I mentioned the first 3: mindfulness of breathing, the 4 postures, and the, as you say, full awareness of various postures. So I think, even though the first exercise, being aware of the breathing, is, you could say, a little bit more subtle than being aware of the bodily postures, but Analio points out that in the Chinese version of the scripture, the mindfulness, the 4 postures are put first, and then the full awareness of body in its various other activities, eating and bathing, whatever, and then mindfulness of breathing.
Makes
So-
sense.
It makes sense, but anyway, I'm a little bit suspicious, but anyway.
It's very fascinating.
Because generally also you can say it's generally helpful that the mind is somewhat calm. You know, so I mean, okay, you can say, well, you know, walking is coarser than sitting, you know, or walking is coarser than sitting watching the breath. But if your mind is very busy, so what? You're walking with it, but not being very mindful, you see. But anyway, we don't need to discuss it. We'll follow the Pali, okay? Back to the breathing. And the breathe, this. Hmm?
So these things, though someone put this in certain order, I'm just asking, this is a question, it may not be, the order may not have been significant, or is it?
Yes and no. Maybe.
It's just a
Yeah,
question.
yeah, but I mean, we can't know.
Okay.
I mean, we can't know if this was exactly what the Buddha said or not, but I think it's good enough. Yeah. But I mean, each person can try it out and see what works for them. You know, and I know some people from retreats in the West anyway, they say, oh, sitting watching the breath is just too hard for me. My mind's too busy, or I'm too nervous or something or other, you know. So for them, maybe it's better to do walking meditation first, you know, rather than try and take up the breathing, that you have to do the breathing first. It's not that important, I would say. It's really there's a number of exercises, and basically the point is to try to have direct experience of the breath and the body and in different postures. So whatever works. Yeah. But I would say that, you know, the breathing, and at least for people who have some experience of meditation, it does provide a good foundation for focusing your attention. Even though it is maybe challenging in the beginning, but then you have to work at it. So with that, you know, good intention, you try harder. If you just say, oh, just walking around, I can be mindful, blah, 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 you know. Yeah. I gave a retreat in New Zealand, and just a weekend, and I mentioned, okay, now we'll have a period for walking meditation. And it was mostly people who've been there before, so I didn't really elaborate very much. So after we came back to the sitting again, and then these people, I said, okay, how was the walking meditation? He said, oh, wonderful birds here. I was out walking, looking at the birds the whole time. That wasn't quite what I meant by walking meditation, bird watching, but but maybe it did calm their mind down, I don't know. At least they enjoyed it. So anyway, breathing meditation, there's many different meditation objects, but breathing is probably the most common. It came from before the time of the Buddha. He just borrowed it from the tradition in India at the time. And it's very basic, very simple, not complicated. You don't need great spiritual teachings to observe the breathing. It's common for everybody to breathe. So it mentions that going to the forest, it means a quiet place basically, and probably we all know by now that noise can be a distraction to focusing attention on particular, especially the body, for example. It's okay if you're reciting a mantra, maybe, but and the exercise, very simple, breathing in long, you breathe in long, breathing in short. Yeah. And then it goes on to experiencing the whole body. A little bit of controversy about what the whole body is. The commentaries say the whole breath body, being aware of the whole body of breath, following it from beginning, middle, and end. This is one of the exercises Ajahn used, trying to follow the breathing right into the body, down to the abdomen and back up again. Well, up to the, I think it is the solar plexus rises. But it could also mean the whole physical body, which seems to be more in keeping with what the scriptures agree with. When you're breathing, the whole body can rise. Chest rises, solar plexus rises. So it is a matter of, you can say, kind of extending this awareness of breathing from one particular part of the body, either the nostrils or wherever you're observing, to a wider area of the body, to kind of broaden out your exercise to other aspects of the breathing process. And then, and it also mentions, in the beginning, it just mentions breathing in long. He understands I breathe in long. The first ones are just observing, if you like, or knowing you're breathing. The second one is the first two, long breath, short breath. And then the next exercises go on to, I shall train oneself. He trains thus, I shall breathe in. He trains himself thus, I will breathe in, experiencing the whole body. Also trains, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formations. So it's a bit of a change from just observing to training the body in mind, to be aware of the whole body and the experiencing the whole body and tranquilizing the bodily formation. And again, if you follow this commentaries, the whole body interpretation of the whole breath body, then tranquilizing the breath body. If you follow the other interpretation, the physical body, then you tranquilize the physical body, which are actually interrelated. Because if you notice that when the breathing is tranquilized, the body's tranquilized, and the mind's tranquilized, and so it doesn't really matter so much which interpretation you follow. Basically, again, I follow Ajahn Chah's advice. He just says, if it works, use it. So you don't need to get too, concerned intellectually by doing exactly what the Buddha said. I don't think the Buddha would be too worried about it, really. If it's giving you if you're get the experience of tranquilizing the body, that's the point. Whether you believe it's through the breathing directly or by breathing to the body directly, doesn't really matter so much, I would say. Whatever works. And then we come to a very important part. So we got the basic instructions, and now it comes to how we do that. So it mentions that when one abides contemplating the body as a body, being directly aware of the body, internally, first of all. So that's when one's own body, internally. It's pretty, well, I'm going to say easy. If you're observing the body internally, if you're observing the body, your first experience probably is internally, right? But then it says to do this externally too. What does that mean? So the general understanding is it is the other people's bodies. So you just try to give a balance again, you see. Internally, externally, then internally, externally together. So the danger of internalizing the practice too much is one becomes very self-absorbed, which is a very common mistake, I think, of many meditators. They get so here they are meditating to realize selflessness, and they get so absorbed in their practice, they get more self-inflated. My practice. Leave me alone, I gotta meditate. Meditation's not yours, you know. But it can be very, the self is very convincing, to say the least. If not something worse. The self is a closed circle, usually. So this is why I try to do this exercise externally too, even though it can be a little bit, more abstract in a way. But it's helping us to get a balance between the internal, external, and then both together, internally, externally. And maybe it's easy enough with something like the body awareness. You can be aware of people's movements, for example, the physical movements, the postures, maybe even the breathing. You could hear people breathing sometime, or observe people breathing if they're still alive. So it's internally, externally, and then both together. And then what we call the real serious insight practice is trying to observe the nature of arising, and the nature of vanishing. Observing and then arising and vanishing together. So the real, we can say, one of the fundamental directions of insight meditation is towards observing impermanence. It's one of the easier ones to observe. One of the characteristics is impermanence, and this helps to undermine this insistence upon a permanent self. But we don't know that at first, but that's what's happening. Or it also says here, developing mindfulness, that there is a body is to be established to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness. So this again, there is body, trying to point out to direct awareness of physical presence of body, and just enough for knowledge and mindfulness, meaning that this is to be a direct experience, not to be conceptualizing about it. I mean, invariably, of course, things arise in the body. I mean, one of the initial experiences of some people is that they get some very strange experiences in the body, because most of us have been relating to the body conceptually. We have some kind of concept of how the body should be, but then the body has its own particular experiences. It has its own dimensions and experience. And sometimes our concepts conflict with experience. I don't know if it sounds familiar to some people.
Is it kind of an expectation when what you're referring to as a concept? Is it an expectation?
You just have an idea. My body is like this. My body should be doing this. It's maybe more obvious when you get a bit older. And I should walk over there quickly and haven't got the energy to do it anymore. or just the various sensations arise in the body. I mean, a common one, I don't know how common for most people, but I mean, what I heard in Thailand anyway, my experience there was that people who do an intensive meditation, they get almost like hallucinations of the body. I mean, I have my own experiences of sitting for hours with the eyes closed, and then I imagined I had this sort of image of my body floating, or it was expanded. I had to look and see if my arms were still, sometimes there is, you could say, psychosomatic expressions in the body too, from the mind calming down. You know, some people get they get twitches and they get vibrations in the body, and some people the body seizes up. You know, one retreat in Switzerland, and I think the very first night, I just gave this instruction about watching the breathing. So just trying to be aware of the breathing as a main meditation object. And we sat quietly for a few minutes, and I heard it crash in the dark. So when you hear crashes in the dark, you wonder what's going on. And then this lady jumped up and ran out. So anyway, I couldn't go talk to her, but fortunately we had a Swiss nun with her and with us, so she went to talk to her. And she just said when she was aware of the breathing, she suddenly just was choking. She had some kind of, I guess, some breathing trauma, which just came up all of a sudden, and she just couldn't breathe. So I told her, well, you know, don't be aware of breathing then. Be aware of the body, sitting sensations of the body, you know, the backside and the cushion, the ankles. You know, there's many different ways to be aware of the body. Yeah. And for her, breathing wasn't the right thing. So until she'd worked through that trauma, then, you know, it wasn't a very skillful meditation object, even though the Buddha recommended it, and you know, but for her it didn't work that well. Yeah, so the various other alternatives, you know, as you're developing the exercise of mindfulness, the mind calms down and becomes more sensitive. So maybe you tune into different levels of the body which you aren't normally familiar with. You know, we have this idea in our mind, our body should be like this, you know, should act like this. But then some of these experiences of how the body really is come out, you know, and then maybe it's a bit of a shock for our system.
A question about how the body is versus how it should be. Is that would you classify that as sana, like perception? Or is that like for instance, if I have a perception of my hand,
Yep.
and I have like this image of a shape,
Yep.
and then maybe some imagine a bone in the middle of it or something, and then I have like the feeling of the hand, and it's like indescribable. Like, is that, would you call that sana? And
Sanya,
Yeah.
sanya, yeah.
And the other question I had is in the tranquilizing the bodily formation, kaya sankara, is that this sort of mental fabrication that we have of the body, or is it the physical body? Because one can let go of the mental fabrication one has of the body, and just sort of let it, whatever it does, but it may not be calm.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, one could have quite a calm body, but quite a strong mental fabrication.
Right, yeah.
So thinking on.
Yeah. I mean, usually we start off with, whether we know it or not, we start off with our concepts. Even trying to watch the breath. What's the breath? Besides a concept in your mind. Until you can tune into it, you know, and you can say, get more a direct experience of it through mindfulness, clearly seeing, clearly aware, you still have to rely upon your concept of it. So same with the formations, for example. You have a formation, a mental idea what it is, what the body's like. But if you bring your awareness to it, allow sati to develop, maybe get a different perception of it, a different experience of it. You know, say perception first and then experience, direct experience. Maybe sometimes you can have experience of the body, a direct experience of the body, and it's just energy. And where is the body, you know, that clunks around normally? It's just glowing energy. But rather than, go back to your sankharas and say, oh, this is wrong or something. Just recognize that's an experience. That's what the knowing says now. You add this to your repertoire of knowing body now. Before we rely upon only our perceptions of it, only our concepts of it. And that's where the concepts and reality don't mix usually. We have fixed concepts and then the body's changing, and whoops, doesn't work that way. So, but now with the developing of mindfulness, you get a more direct experience, and that takes precedent over the concepts. That's more in tune with it. Mindfulness is present moment awareness. Concepts are old messages, old information. So the mindfulness, sati, is more reliable, I would say. So you just add that to your repertoire, and okay, yes, sometimes I experience the body as energy. Sometimes it is, it is more solid. That's all part of the picture too. And then you recognize the limitations maybe of the concepts, of the perceptions and concepts, and slowly let them go then, because they don't fit the bigger picture. They're very limited in their extent. Yeah?
Yeah, so
Good enough?
it's good. I guess it's like, like it's just, I mean, it's just a proliferation sometimes.
Yes, yeah.
Which comes up when you're reading the Satipatthana Sutta, study body meditating,
Yeah. And there's still a bit more to this. Got a few minutes yet. So we get to the, we've done the breathing so far, and it comes to the 4 postures. Walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. Accordingly, however the body is disposed. So again, these 4 postures are just kind of the basic 4 pointed out by the Buddha. Of course, there's many different postures, squatting, kneeling, whatever, but the 4 are the main points of reference. So, we know about sitting down for the breathing. There's also walking meditation. There's also standing meditation. Some teachers emphasize and also bring that in as a formal exercise, standing meditation. Lying down meditation. There is mention in the scriptures about when you're going to sleep, to lie down mindfully, fully mindful, so you go to sleep mindfully, waking up mindfully, and so you are able to sustain a certain degree of continuity in the development of mindfulness, not only when you're watching the breath, but to all the activities. And then it goes on to explain the awareness of the body in other activities, going forward and returning, looking ahead and looking away, flexing and extending his limbs, wearing the robes, wearing clothes, eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting. And all these various other activities of the body, again, is helpful to be able to maintain a certain continuity of awareness, because sometimes, people can be quite mindful of the breathing, for example. They develop this to a certain proficiency, but very unmindful in other activities. There's also mention in the scriptures about these bodily actions. How the body is disposed also shows people's state of mind. So it also is like a little bridge, if you like, being aware of the body and its different postures and activities can also be a bridge to observing the states of mind, because sometimes it's body-mind interrelated. So, like when you notice some people walking, yourself maybe, when you're walking, sometimes you're walking angrily. Sometimes you're walking calmly. Sometimes you're walking greedily. You notice that? When the bell rings, the lunch bell. there was somebody in Switzerland, and she did this. She studied this method of what do you call it? Body awareness, I could say, from a certain other tradition, and it was also related to, they read in the body the people's state of mind, their psychological state. So she could just look at people and oh, that person's thinking this, It was very uncanny. It was a bit spooky in a way. And then how you hold your posture, how you stand, it reflects your state of mind, and vice versa. Your state of mind is reflected in your posture. So when you develop more awareness with regard to the body, sometimes it is an opening. Oh, for example, when people are even in sitting meditation, some people are very rigid in how they sit. And then, and when I usually on retreats, when I see somebody sitting very, very rigidly, I better watch them. They're the ones who are trying too hard. And they're invariably the first ones to leave. They're just trying too hard to get some result. Where others, even the ones that were a bit slumped, they'll pull out of it eventually, maybe. On the other hand, if somebody is slumped all the time, it shows maybe they have some energy problem. It could be mentally or physically. They could have some physical problem and they don't even know it. There was one of the monks in Thailand. He had quite a bit of sleepiness, and then he found out later that he had this, chronic fatigue syndrome. Chronic fatigue syndrome. There is an illness like that, isn't there? Yeah. Yeah. He thought he had a real, problem with meditation, but he was actually ill. So sometimes it's being able to be aware of the body in its different positions, different postures, can be helpful to recognize the state of mind too. But the main point is in developing awareness of body, and I would say myself that it doesn't actually mention in the scripture, how we're aware of body. Probably because in the Buddhist time, people were much more aware of their body. Being speculative here. But I noticed, for example, living in northeast Thailand in a farming village, people were incredibly aware of their body. They spend a lot of time, of course, working with their body in the rice fields. So they had natural body awareness. Where when I saw some of the Westerners stagger into the sala, I thought, oh my goodness, they come in like elephants. They're up in their head. It was pretty obvious. They kept staggering with their head, and don't know where their feet are going, But then to see these Thai farmers come in, and they just kind of floated in, so present in their body. They weren't up in their head at all. Just kind of really, really present, and knowing not only they're being aware of their body, but where the body was located too. They have a very, very strong sense of space. For example, the Buddha's in the front. The main position of reverence is the Buddha statue up high in an obvious position, and there you sit down lower, and that was, I guess, taught to them by their culture. But they also had a natural sense of body awareness. They had to be, because they had to work in the rice field all day long. So unless you're aware of your energy level, and this, I could develop a little bit of this when I was in Switzerland walking in the mountains. You have to be quite aware of your energy level. And if you get to the top of the mountain and you're exhausted, how do you get down? It's more dangerous going down the mountain when you're tired than going up, actually. So we were sort of forced to be much more aware of bodily energies, for example, and strength and things like that. So it is a quality which can be developed, and within that, one also becomes aware of this changing nature of body. You know, we think, oh, I should be able to get to that mountain peak over there, or that lookout point there. You see, I should be able to. When you start off, different body. Sometimes the body is naturally energetic. Sometimes it is naturally fatigued. Why, I don't know. What I ate today, what the weather's like, my bad karma. I don't know what it is. But you have to tune into the body then, and okay, right, it's a different body today. Even though I think it should be like this, but this is how it is. And it can go beyond like and dislike, because that's just the way it is. What do you do with it? You can argue with it. You can argue with your body. Yeah? Does the body listen to you? Not often. The body wins the argument every time. So I would say that, what I add to this is that the direct way to be aware of body is sensation, sense of touch. So you sense the body, rather than, for me, if I just say body, then I go into my concept. But when it comes to sensation, there's a direct experience of body touch. So we're aware the body's hot, cold, tense, relaxed, whatever. So the body awareness is being aware of sensation. It's a direct experience. Sensation, how you define the sense of touch in the body. Of course, it mixes up sometime with the next one, feeling. You say, how are you feeling? Can apply to emotion or body, right? Yeah, so, but I put it down to just physical sensation, mental feeling. Feeling is a mental thing in Buddhism. Vedana, in a way, feel that translation of the Pali word Vedana. So we've done the first few exercises here, and as I say, this is a discourse on giving the instructions how to practice. So more important, have a good grounding in that practice, rather than just finishing off the rest of the chapter. And since we have 3 months here, right? Some of us anyway. You have time to go through it and get a good grounding in the exercises. And once, I would say that the other exercises build upon the ground of being aware of the body. This gives us a whole, an understanding of the whole dimension of mindfulness, being aware of sensation, just a direct experience of it. Especially when you move into feelings and states of mind, they can become a little bit more abstract. We just go into our mind and start conceptualizing very easily. But the body, to be able to tune into the body, the sensation is not a thought. It's the opposite to a thought. Huh? Feeling, the sensation in the body is opposite to a thought. My mind says, don't hurt. My body says, ouch. So, yeah.
Long part with the internally and externally, as I always thought that it was like internal organs and external body, because if I was to see my body, then it's a thought. It's created a perception of another human, another being, and really it's just a bunch of it's the body.
Yeah. But if you have mindfulness, you see it differently. See, if you're developing mindfulness, this is just a direct experience. So ideally, the conceptualizing is quietened down at the least. It's just being present. That's how the body is. And the proliferation and all the perceptions and all the rest of it, ideally, is quietened down, so you see it differently. And especially if you're tuned into your own body, the breathing, you get your own direct experience of that, And then you take it to the external now. You're just seeing body breathing. You're not seeing that person. You're just seeing, now you're aware of this body, this breathing here in this body. And you look out there, breathing in that body. I don't know. What's your name again? You know. I just see breathing body. I don't see, I won't mention your name because you might be recorded, but do you see the point?
Yeah, I can see that.
So you do it internally first, and then you try to extend that.
And one of them.
And if you start to go into proliferation and thinking, and oh, that person, oh yeah, I like that person, back to internal breathing again. Back to internal awareness of the body. Until you fine-tune mindfulness, that you can now extend it outside without going off into the conceptualizing again.
Yeah, because it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because it's.
Stay with the internal first then. Stay with the internal. That's why I say in a way it's easier, internal, in a way. It's also, if you can say internally be aware of the breathing, for example, it's easier and it's simpler in a way because not the usual complications of seeing, how we usually see the world. But of course, to get to the direct experience of internal mindfulness of breathing, not so easy. But first, and then you try to extend it now externally, and then both together. And maybe you can recognize these are just bodies breathing. Yeah, there's a bird out there. He, she, it is also breathing. We're not humans and birds anymore. We're just breathers. Goes beyond all the the proliferation and the normal perceptions. Yeah, sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, there's, I guess, internal components.
So we practice in a way like that to able to see anatta. And because we see anatta, then all our greed and anger delusion slowly drop.
Ideally, yes. You see the body in the body. Where's I in that?
Yeah.
There's just body. Yeah. Okay, there is that.
So we see more reality rather than
Yes,
concepts.
Yeah. Then all the subjective references you add onto it. It's body. And the point is you see the body really how it really is. Most of the time we're building our life around interpretations and fantasies and expectations and not how it really is. So that's why we're so out of tune with reality. But if you can see the body as the body, and then okay, the body says this. Okay, now I listen to it, rather than think you shouldn't be that way. You should be like that. But what's the point? It just creates more friction and suffering.
So I thought if we can see there is no cells in any of us, and then we more love for them, understanding and more love and more kindness.
Yeah, I mean you can relate it to them. You see that in yourself, and so oh yes, they're just like me. They're just the same. We're all in this together. We're all human beings. We're all breathing beings. We're all sentient beings, and so why?
All in the same boat.
Yes, yeah.
Suffering.
So it becomes a kind of a natural result of the practice, I would say. Less, I say, we're less self-centered and more reality-centered. Sound good?
Paul, I have a question. When we breathe in and we're aware that we're breathing in short, and we're aware that we're breathing out short, should there be a voice in the head saying, I am aware this is a long breath, I'm aware this is a short breath, or it's just breathing without a voice? So Should it be a voice or without a voice?
Well, in the scripture it says that one is aware, I am breathing in. There is a reference to the self. You know, you're aware, I am breathing in a long breath. I am breathing out a long breath, etc. But after a while, when you become more familiar with, when mindfulness gets stronger, then you don't need to have that as a reminder. I mean, this is sort of a progression in the development of mindfulness. First of all, it's very, very subjective and conceptual, I would say. I'm being aware of my body. But if you develop it, then maybe there's still a bit of I'm aware of body or breathing. Then awareness of breathing. Then there just is awareness itself. You know, it's like a progression of the development of it. Initially, it's still very subjective. You know, what am I doing? I'm being aware of a long breath. Okay. So that's where most people start off with, but as it progresses, maybe the self-reference then just begins to drop away, because it becomes something which now your mind is set up to, you're being attentive to the breath, even to the point where you can be doing other things, but there's still a subliminal awareness of breathing in the process without having to remind yourself. So the mindfulness of breathing is beginning to flow then, or something, or become a natural element or aspect of your way of being.
I wanted to ask is, with the bodily activities calmed, just something I observe is like gross sensations slowly dissolving into less gross or more subtler sensation.
Or you're aware of more subtler sensation, you mean?
Sometimes it's almost experiencing that things, instead of just being really solid or more painful even, it's sort of more, it's not able to take a hold, and it sort of becomes more flimsy and soft and breaking
and
apart and
yeah.
just more anicca, I guess.
Yeah.
Like it's not really a permanent.
Yeah. It's more, I would say, more processive. It's more of a process rather than kind of events, particular events. They're just processes flowing together. Some are a little bit more intense and some are less intense. And your body is always in motion, even when you're standing still. Your heart's still beating, you're still breathing, blood's still pulsing in your veins. You know. But who notices that? Usually you notice the strongest ones first. You know. But as mindfulness develops, you get more sensitized to more subtler levels. And that's why sometimes some of these more subtler levels can become quite strong. You're suddenly aware of the blood pulsing in your veins and I'm having a heart attack. Just the awareness is stronger of that particular area of the body, where normally you wouldn't pay attention to it.
Are there bodily signs of unskillful effort?
Unskillful effort.
Yeah.
I would say tension.
Yeah.
It usually means that, you know, too much exertion or too much goal-orientated direction, and creates more tension. That's one.
Samadhi headaches, they say.
Samadhi headaches, okay. Yeah. Okay, this is okay. Yeah.
With the regular section of starting with body in body, internally, externally, the last part of that, attached without clinging, that section, would you be able to just touch on that a bit more?
Yep, I remember it. Is it that's not part two, is it?
I think we would.
Okay, yes. Yeah, I mentioned about just being aware of the body. There is body for the extent of bare knowledge and mindfulness. I mean, it's also implying that when it doesn't try to intellectualize it too much, try and figure it out and find a reason for it or something or other. Just bare knowledge and mindfulness. This is what's happening. And he buys independent, not cling to anything in the world. This is a little bit more of a, you can say, an advanced stage, to be not cling to anything in the world. I mean, you can imagine, for example, not even clinging to results that I'm progressing or I'm getting somewhere, or I'm getting close to Nibbana or something. Not even bringing up those kind of thoughts. I mean, it's a bit subtler. Yeah. But the point is that in developed mindfulness, it has, you can say, a life of its own. So maybe the attitude, the most useful attitude is renunciation, letting go of your expectations and any thought of progress and many times when it mentions about the experience of Nibbana, it mentions that a person dwells independent of even the teacher's teaching. They realize it for themselves. It's a direct experience, and they aren't dependent upon, the Buddha said this, the Buddha said that. You realize that you know for yourself, to be seeing each person for themselves. And then there's no clinging, no grasping of any result, not even clinging to Nibbana. It's a hard one at this stage.
It's a good clinging.
Well, in the beginning, okay, yeah. But to realize that ultimately even that has to be given up. But it's a more advanced stage, though. Keep with the good clinging first. For now.
Oh, I'm tired for now.
For a few more months, anyway. So it's after 4 o'clock. 16 hours. Okay. So continue with the practice. Put those words into your direct experience, so you find out for yourself. And then I'll think of a next theme for next week. I think maybe we just continue a little bit. I mean, it can be helpful, for example, I don't know if we need to go into so much detail with the body awareness, but there's 3 more exercises, right?
Yeah.
The parts of the body, the elements, and the body as a
The dead body.
Yeah. eternal
9 days.
corpse contemplations or something. Somebody want to volunteer for? But it's helpful to know anyway that there are other ways to develop mindfulness of the body. They're a little bit more abstract and it may take some study, but at least to read about them. And then maybe we'll continue with feelings next week. Continue with reading the next chapter on feelings. That's a more subtler one because, but if your practice is grounded in the body awareness, then you have a very good foundation. Be aware of the feelings that come out of sensation, you see. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Okay, good enough. So, continue your practice. Next, what? Tea time, huh? Tea time meditation.
So next week we read the feeling.
Yep, yeah. And that's there's only one chapter, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the rest of the body.
Yep.
And the beginning of the feeling.
Yeah.
So,
So
which
that's
pages, Ajahn?
that goes
1,
to
4 to 8.
150, middle of 150, section 33.
Yeah, but we still continue from 148, 149.
Yep.
I believe there's also a copy of the Satipatthana Sutta in the book, in the Buddha's words, which is about 8 copies in the library that people voting.
Oh, yeah.
So that you don't need necessarily just have 2 other people can read them.
Sure, but it's 5 pages, isn't it?
This is
Sure. But if you do bring it back to your kuti, just be mindful that don't leave it outside and don't read it in bed and sleep it over and lie on top of it or whatever.
Also, Ajahn, to reiterate this, is there, can we chant in the night a little? 1 week or what?
We'll start with the cardinal suttas first, and we'll learn that.
Sorry,
We'll start with the 3 cardinal suttas first.
what
Yeah.
are the cardinal?
The cardinal suttas are the Dhammacakka
Yeah.
Sutta, Anatta Lakkhana, the non-self, and the fire sermon, the
Ah.
Adita Pariyaya.
Adita.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the thing
Good,
first.
good, good.
Yeah, first.
First sermon, second sermon, third sermon.
Yeah, yeah. There's a reason why the Buddha taught that, right?
Yeah.
We reflect on why does he do that in that order? And as you know, in traditional Buddhist country, many people, chant it
Yeah, yeah.
for different reasons.
It's not in the brown book, Ajahn?
Yes.
The yellow book.
Yellow book.
Yellow.
Oh.
Usually I've got to see.
Well, lots of copies of the yellow book.
Yeah,
You can
you
take.
can have one.
I've got to see the anyone want to
Yellow.
sing along.
Huh?
And
Yeah, like this is brown and then yellow. This book, volume 1, volume 2. Volume 2 is
The
yellow.
one
Well,
is
the
library.
Yellow, it's sort of light brown, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but wow,
light brown, dark brown.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
it's really
There's none there right now, but
We have lots of copies in the library. Because the people like to take the dark brown one away, so we've got a shortage of that. But the light brown one, we have a few copies.
the dark brown one is there at the bottom.
That's just for
our
here.
copies.
That is sort of.
Oh, I see. Okay, not for free. It's in the free distribution. It says free books there. Gotta be careful. Yeah.
Free occasionally.
There isn't any of this book in the library though.
No, no.
It's my personal book, my personal
That's
copy.
fine. Huh?
There's
Don't
one
want to
copy of Satipatthana, the direct path to realization by Bhikkhu Anahana. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, there's one copy.
It was no.
Is there? Is there?
Yeah. We tried burning it, but someone burned it.
I ordered it specially because it got burned up in my kuti.
Somebody probably just had it at family house and then returned it or something. People need to write. I just saw it there, but there's a logbook, so books out. You can,
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah.
This is one too.
Yeah, just in case we